Welcome to the Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here because, honestly, we're doing something pretty incredible today. We're literally mapping out the deep psychological and traditional Chinese medicine foundations of EFT tapping. So if you've ever found yourself wondering why just tapping on specific points on your body creates these massive, profound emotional shifts, well, you're exactly in the right place. We're going to break down the anatomy of this entire healing circuit layer by layer, point by point. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. We aren't just looking at some random list of topics today. No, we're taking a structured spatial journey straight across the human nervous system. We're going to hit the mind-body energy map, the hand for clearing resistance, the face for processing emotion, the core for survival and belonging, the crown for final integration, and then wrap it all up with the complete healing circuit.
So, starting right off with Section 1, the mind-body energy map. This is where we lay the absolute groundwork for our journey.
To truly grasp what's actually happening when we tap, we kind of have to look through a dual lens: traditional Chinese medicine on one side and modern clinical psychology on the other. In TCM, you've got this vital life force energy known as qi flowing through very specific pathways in your body called meridians. Now, when we experience emotional distress, boom, that energy gets blocked. It's like a traffic jam. But tapping on these specific acupoints introduces real kinetic energy right into those blocked pathways. And senior practitioners will tell you, this is definitely not just a physical thing. These points form this completely elegant psycho-emotional circuit that literally clears the distress right out of your system.
You know, you can really think of the tapping sequence as a journey from fragmentation straight to wholeness. It's like putting a giant puzzle back together. Because in just a single tapping round, you're moving energetically from your hand up to the perceptive centers on your face, all the way down into those heavy survival centers in your body's core, and then finally reaching up to the spirit at the crown of your head. It is just such a beautifully designed flow.
All right, moving right along to our first physical zone, Section 2, the hand. This is where we tackle clearing out all that initial resistance.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the crazy duality between the physical and the emotional. Think about the karate chop point. It sits right on the side of your hand along the small intestine meridian, which in TCM corresponds to the fire element. Physically, your small intestine's job is to sort out what nourishes you from what just needs to be thrown away, right? But emotionally, when this meridian is blocked, it manifests as this profound emotional confusion. Psychologists actually call it psychological reversal. It's basically the total inability to sort out your own inner conflicts. You're just stuck.
And when this meridian is blocked, the symptoms are, well, they're incredibly heavy. You might feel this subconscious no, like a hidden part of you that secretly just wants to stay stuck and completely resist healing. And that leads to chronic self-sabotage, totally confused personal boundaries where you're just absorbing everyone else's emotional baggage, and these deep, deep-seated feelings of unworthiness and shame. It's literally that heavy whisper in the back of your mind saying, I don't deserve to get better.
Which brings us to a really fascinating piece of insider wisdom from senior practitioners. This is exactly why the EFT setup statement, the classic, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself line, is tapped right there on the karate chop point. Because you are literally clearing the small intestine meridian's confusion sorting function. You are dissolving that psychological reversal and that paralyzing self-doubt before the actual healing sequence can even proceed. It's a total prerequisite.
So, with all that initial resistance out of the way, it begs the question, where does frozen trauma and trapped resentment actually live in the body? Like, how do we physically perceive it?
And that brings us to Section 3, the face. This is exactly where our perception and immediate emotions are confronted head-on.
And this brilliantly illustrates the powerful emotional polarity happening right around our eyes. Look at the inner edge of the eyebrow. Here, we have the bladder meridian, an element of water that literally holds deep existential trauma and just frozen fear. But then move literally an inch to the outer corner, the side of the eye, and bam, we hit the gallbladder meridian. That's an element of wood. And this spot, this is where we hold outward rage, bitterness, and chronic indecision. So the inner eye is holding all the fear, while the outer eye is holding all the fight.
The mind symptoms here, they are incredibly frustrating if you're dealing with them. We're talking emotional paralysis and hypervigilance tied to the eyebrow point, right over to suppress anger and that short fuse volatility at the side of the eye. Plus, we absolutely cannot forget the stomach meridian, sitting directly under the eye. When your stomach can't literally digest a heavy emotional experience, like deep grief or feeling unloved, it just loops it. It loops endlessly in your system as anxiety, dread, and even physical cravings.
Now, I want to share a remarkable clinical secret about that side of the eye point. Because the gallbladder meridian governs decision-making and how we handle change, tension here often physically shows up as, tight temples or a totally clenched jaw. And practitioners have noticed that clients carrying deep, long-standing anger, maybe at a parent, a boss, or just an unfair life situation, they show absolutely incredible shifts when they tap right here, especially when they hold the intention of releasing that resentment from literally every single cell in their body. It's a total game changer.
Okay, so once we've finally processed that immediate perception of fear and anger up on the face, we kind of have to move deeper, right? So how do we process the absolute deepest, most primal fears of survival, identity, and belonging?
Well, that takes us right down into section 4, the core. This is where the really heavy foundational emotions get stored right in the torso.
As we map out the core, we're really hitting the deepest human wounds. I mean, right under the nose, on the governing vessel, we find the absolute seat of profound shame and identity fragmentation. It's that intense imposter syndrome that, let's be honest, we probably all know way too well. Then, just below the lip on the chin, on the conception vessel, lies this deep confusion and the sheer inability to just receive love. Move down to the collarbone on the kidney meridian and you hit existential and ancestral fear. And finally, tucked under the arm on the spleen meridian lives obsessive worry and this heartbreaking fear of not belonging. It is a super heavy map to look at, for sure. But validating these feelings, that is the very first step to actually clearing them.
Let's zoom in on that collarbone point for a second, known in acupuncture as Ki-27. This specific point connects directly into your thoracic nervous system. Now, in TCM, the kidneys store our ancestral inheritance and our root willpower. So tapping here, it produces some of the most profound emotional releases you could possibly imagine. Why? Because this specific physical junction is literally where the belief, I am fundamentally not safe in the world, sets up camp and lives in your body.
Wow.
So the crucial point is figuring out how we actually begin to harmonize all of this really heavy energy. Moving over to the underarm point, we hit SP21 on the spleen meridian. They call this the Great Luo, which means the grand connecting point for all your meridians. Listen, if you struggle with people-pleasing, overgiving, or just constantly feeling like your needs don't matter, this point absolutely deserves your attention. Tapping right here creates this massive systemic harmonization effect across your entire body. It just clears out that obsessive worry that you're somehow a burden to everyone else.
Okay, having finally cleared out the core, we rise up to section 5, the crown. Time for our final integration.
Right at the very top of the head sits GV20, which has the beautiful name, the 100 Convergences. This is considered among the most sacred points in Chinese medicine. It's where all the yang meridians meet, literally where heaven meets earth in the human body. But man, contrast that incredible sacredness with what happens when it's blocked. When blocked, the energy just drops from awe-inspiring to utterly draining. We're talking chaotic brain fog, serious dissociation, mental scatter, and just this heavy, dark feeling of being cosmically abandoned or entirely alone in the universe.
This is why expert practitioners note that tapping this crown point while holding an intention of wholeness is absolutely vital. It creates this remarkable integrative effect. The racing thoughts just stop. The whole session finally lands. The healing settles deep, deep down into your nervous system. And this brilliant intentional design is exactly why EFT's founder, Gary Craig, placed this point dead last in the sequence. It literally anchors the insight directly into physical embodiment.
Which brings us beautifully right to our final section, Section 6, the complete healing circuit. Let's synthesize this whole journey.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an incredibly elegant, completely integrated map. Think about it. We start at the karate chop to clear out our self-sabotage and confusion. Then we move to the face to process our immediate trauma, fear, rage, and anxiety. After that, we travel straight down our core midline to release the heavy shame, despair, and that existential lack of safety. We harmonize all our worry under the arm. And finally, we rise back up to the crown to integrate our scattered minds into pure purpose. It's the whole shebang, a complete, total psycho-emotional circuit wrapped into one single sequence.
So, as we've seen, these are definitely not just random taps on the body. They are literal keys to unlocking a highly structured, energetic map of your very psyche. So, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to carry with you today. If your body physically maps your absolute deepest emotional blocks, and it actively holds the precise coordinates needed to clear them, which point will your very next tap release? Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.